Hello everyone. Welcome to America's Lost Gold. Our series is all about lost gold mines and treasures located all over our great land. I'm your host, Lyndon Graves. Today we're going to discuss one of the most famous and sought-after lost mines, known as the Lost Dutchman. But first, I want to introduce my great friend and co-host, Dr. Roy Rausch. Dr. Rausch is known worldwide for his expertise in treasure hunting and has been the focus of several television shows about lost treasures. Dr. Rausch, welcome.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It sure is good to have you.
Same here.
Okay, let's begin with a brief history of the area. Our story takes place just outside of Phoenix, Arizona, in the mighty Superstition mountain range. Prior to the arrival of civilized man, these mountains were populated by several Indian tribes, including the Pimas, the Apache, and others. These Indians were not savages, but had organized societies, as evidenced by remaining cliff dwellings and reports about their farming and irrigation. In the year 1540, Spain sent an expedition led by Francisco Vázquez de Coronado into the New Spain, including the territories of what is now Sonora, Mexico, Arizona, and beyond. The men of the expedition noticed that the Apaches were adorned with gold jewelry and inquired as to where the gold came from. The Apaches freely told them that it was from the great mountain of their thunder god, a very sacred place. Coronado and his men took off and went into the sacred mountains. They found rich gold veins and began to mine them. Suddenly, one by one, his men began to disappear. A few days later, their bodies would be found beheaded. After losing several men, Coronado decided to flee the area, and he returned to Spain with the gold that they had mined. Upon his return, the news of gold being found in New Spain spread across the country. Coronado named the mountains Superstition due to the Indian beliefs, and that name has stuck ever since. 300 years later, a wealthy man named Don Miguel Peralta from Sonora, Mexico, having heard of the great Coronado treasure, organized an expedition to go into Arizona and find the gold deposits of the Superstitions. Around 1845, the expedition found rich gold veins and began mining them. The gold was taken back to Sonora. Based upon the ruins that have been found, Peralta was very careful to protect his men and mules from Indian attack. However, around 1848, Peralta heard that the Apaches were planning an attack. So he packed up his camp and planned to leave early the next morning. Unfortunately, the Apaches came in very early and killed everyone. This became known as the Peralta Massacre. The Apaches did not care about the gold in the saddlebags of the mules, and they scattered the mules with the gold still on their backs. Several mule remains have been found with gold attached as late as 1914. It is estimated that Peralta had possibly as many as 8 mine shafts working at that time. In 1846, a German man named Jacob Waltz migrated to the eastern United States and began working in the gold mines of Northern Carolina. He worked his way west to California and then drifted towards Arizona, settling in the Phoenix area in April of 1868. He began to prospect the Arizona desert and work in the other gold mines for a living to support himself. During this time, it is believed that he was to have met another German man named Jacob Weiser. These two men are credited for rediscovering one of the Peralta lost mines. There are several different stories as to how they found the mine, but the main point is that they did. Occasionally, Waltz would come into town to buy supplies into Phoenix, and he would be spending gold nuggets of very fine quality. He was frequently followed out of town as he left, but he would always lose them in the rough terrain. Waltz died of pneumonia in 1891 and is buried at Pioneer and Memorial Park in Lot 19, grave number 4. So, Roy, I have a few questions for you.
I'll see if I got a few answers for you.
Fantastic. How many times have you gone into the Superstitions?
At least 5 that I can remember.
And what was it like inside?
Well, somebody told me one time, and I thought I agreed with it, it was described as a wilderness of unreality. And I think that describes it very well. There is nothing like the mysterious feeling that you feel when you go into the Superstition Mountains. You can almost feel the curse that the Apache Indians put on it.
So
and
it
it's
does,
a very dangerous place.
It does feel like sacred ground.
Yes, and you must be well prepared. A lot of people have gotten lost. A lot of people have been murdered. They have been attacked by rattlesnakes. I knew a man once that had at least 15 or 20 snake bites.
Goodness.
And you better be prepared before you go in. That's all I can say.
Well, once and for all, let us settle one issue here. Is there gold in the Superstitions?
Yes.
How do you know?
Well, because for one thing, I saw the one nugget on display at the Superstition Mountain Association some years ago that Waltz had sold to a surveyor. And the strange thing about it is that they have tried to match that gold with other locations where he might have worked, like the Vulture Mine at Wickenburg, Arizona, where he was before he went to Phoenix. You see, each piece of gold has its own footprint. It's a combination of gold and lead and silver and so forth. Mm-hmm. And experts can match nuggets from different mines. So far, they have not been able to match that gold with any other area except for the Superstition. So yes, I believe there's gold there.
And didn't you yourself find some evidence of a vein that...
Yes, one of the last times I was in there, I was hired by a professional treasure hunter to go in with my equipment, metal detector, something like this, and some also with double loops, we call them, that would go deeper. And I spent about 4 or 5 days in there. This gentleman thought he knew the approximate area of one of the old Peralta mines, supposedly one of the mines that the Dutchman might have worked and covered up. And I did succeed in locating, I get a very good reading, and they dug into the vein and removed part of it, and it was assayed at $400 an ounce, and that's pretty rich gold. So yes, you might say I have been able to discover gold in the Superstitions.
For those of you watching, this is what we're talking about. Isn't that sweet?
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Look at that shine and that luster. How much would you say that weighs?
Oh,
4 or 5 ounces?
no more than that.
More
Probably 12, 15 ounces.
Goodness.
At least.
Make sure you take that home with you.
Oh, yes. And hide it.
Okay. Briefly, another question here. Is there an Apache curse on the gold?
Well, apparently the Apaches did put a curse on it. And if you believe in curses and you go in the Superstitions, you might really actually believe in the curse, because very strange things happen there. And misfortunes that have happened to some people, they say, well, it's because of the Apache Curse. I fell victim to the Apache Curse.
And we're going to be showing the audience some of the mines and some of the gold veins and ores that come out of the area, so you have an idea of what you would be looking for just walking around. I'm going to just insert some pictures as we're talking here. Okay, so let's talk about some of the victims. What is your opinion of the Superstitions? You've told me before that you kind of have an opinion of that area as being mystical and...
Well, you know, trying to tell the story of the Superstition Mountains is akin to trying to tell the story of the Revolutionary War in about 30 minutes. We could talk for 2 or 3 hours and still just sort of skim the surface on subject matter. For one thing, it is the most famous lost mine in the world. People have come from all over the world, including Europe, to come here just to look for the Superstitions, or for the Dutchman's gold. It has all the elements of of a bestseller book. As a matter of fact, a lot of these books here are from my library. All these books are from my library, but this is just a small percentage of the books that have been written about the Dutchman and the Superstition Mountains. Like I say, it had all the elements of murder mysteries, of bestsellers, and of movies. As a matter of fact, my friend Barry Storm, who was the first writer on the Superstitions, he made it popular because he spent a lot of time in there. They made a movie from one of his books, starring Glenn Ford and Ida Lupino, called Thunder God's Gold.
Right.
And it was a very popular movie and was somewhat fairly true to life.
Well, just to interject, there's also video games.
Oh, yes.
And a board game.
Yes.
Called the Lost Dutchman Mine,
Yes.
which is fascinating. It's
very famous.
Become quite a known societal issue.
Yes.
It's pretty
I
well
might
known
also
even
say
across.
one other thing. This is the most found lost mine in the world. Here's a few of the newspaper articles about it. Now, it turns out
Might show the camera there.
in all of these cases, that they were either mistaken or it was fraudulent. In cases where it was fraudulent, these people knew they didn't find the lost mine, and they were out to get investors to give them money to go in. One guy came out one time, said he'd found the Lost Dutchman Mine and he had gold to show it. But upon close examination, they found out the gold that he presented was actually dental gold, so it was another fake. And it's a dangerous place to go. Many people have been killed, murdered, shot, found dead.
Well, that's my next question.
Okay.
You know, what other dangers lurk for prospectors? Just in fairness to our audience, that what should they be leery of going in?
Many things. First off, be well prepared. Have maps. I would suggest that if you haven't been into an area like this before, don't go in. It's no place for tenderfeets. And if you are a tenderfoot, then hire a guide to take you in. They can take you in by horseback. They can take you in with helicopter tours. Many ways of getting in there. Now, you cannot take a dirt bike in. There is nothing motorized allowed in the Superstitions, not even a helicopter. But you can walk in, anything, just muscle power.
Okay. But what are the dangers? For example, I know there's mountain lions. I know there's coyotes. There's been some talk of bears still there.
Yes. There's wild animals, lots of rattlesnakes. There's places where you could easily lose your balance and fall over a cliff. That's happened many times and written up in some of these publications. People have been mysteriously shot. The first famous one was in 1931. An elderly guy came out from New York. His name was Adolph Ruth, and he claimed to have had the original map to the Lost Dutchman. He hired 2 cowboys to take him in by horseback, and at a certain point, about halfway in, he told the 2 cowboys to go back, and he was going on by himself. He never showed up. Maybe a year later, they found his skeleton. The skull had a bullet hole through it. The 2 cowboys were questioned. They said, well, the last we saw him, he was wandering on by himself. But in reality, everybody is in agreement, knows the circumstances, that the 2 cowboys killed him and took the map because the map was never found among his effects. And that started, it seemed like a whole chain of other mysterious shootings, killings, and so forth. Now, other things to be aware of is getting lost, dying from exposure,
A lot of heat.
and other treasure hunters. There's been gun battles between groups of treasure hunters. These people in there are paranoid. I know.
Well, part of the reason for that is that just about every decade, every 10 years, 2 or 3 people at least are killed in there.
Oh, it averages at least 1 or 2 a year. Here's a couple of newspaper articles about, it says, another murder in legend. Slain couple identified as New Yorkers. Just a few things out of my scrapbook.
And good point, men and women, both.
Men and women.
I
Yes.
remember there's a cave on the face of the mountain. They found a woman shot to death inside with some gold nuggets laying beside
Yes.
her, and that made no sense. But you know, a lot of people have gone in and disappeared, not been found.
Not been found.
You know, even in the 60s, college students, just a wide variety of people have gone in. It might, a point of interest, the governor of Arizona actually went in himself looking
Yes.
for this mine.
There was an old prospector that lived at the base of the Superstition Mountains by the name of Barney Bernard. And he was a writer, and there's one of his publications over there. And about every 3 or 4 years, he would come out with the latest news on the superstitions, particularly involving the people who went in and didn't come out, and other ordeals. And he claimed that there was an average during the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, there was an average of maybe 1 or 2 a month of death in the superstitions.
Well, let's move on a little bit.
Yes.
What clues did Waltz leave behind?
Okay, I'm glad you asked me that question. Here is what, to be precise, Dutchman, in his own words, was said to have said, "My mine is in a canyon running north and south. Across from my mine is a cave. The afternoon sun shines into my cave. From my cave, I can see Weaver's Needle." By the way, if you're going in, locate Weaver's Needle on a map, and you want to go somewhere east of Weaver's Needle.
I think we have a picture of that, just to
Yes.
bring it in. Yeah.
My shaft goes down on an 18-inch thick vein. I water my horses at the old water hole. I covered my mine for all miners, to hide it from all miners. So said the Dutchman in 1889. Now, also, he said another thing was that from the he could see the military trail from his mine, but you cannot see his mine from the military trail. The military trail was a trail that ran from east to west or from west to east, bisected the superstitions almost in half. And at the far south side, it ends along the highway at Picket Post. And Picket Post was an old military installation back during that period of time. So that's the best I can tell you as to clues.
All right. And just to add a little bit about the military presence, starting in about, I think it was 1863 and moving on up to the 1870s, the U.S. Army came in and eradicated the Apaches. There were a lot of Apache massacres that occurred.
Yes, I've been to some of those sites.
Women and children, it was quite brutal. And so it was not just a one-sided massacre, it went both directions. So I think other clues that I've heard about the Dutchman are that the shadow from the peak of Weaver's Needle will come and touch the opening of his mine at one point during the year?
That has been said, but I don't know the Dutchman ever claimed that. One word, if you are looking for his mine, if you are not already a gold miner or a gold panner and you're familiar with what where a vein of gold might be, you would want to look for tailings where people have been digging and shoveling dirt out. You want to look for particularly white quartz or the bodies of rock where gold might occur. You're not going to walk around and you're not going to stumble onto it. It's not going to be easy to find. Probably several thousand people have been into the superstitions looking for the mine. The thing of it is, they all follow the path of least resistance, where 1,000 people have been before, and they come out like all the rest of them, well, we didn't see it, because they don't want to go through the thorn bushes. They don't want to climb up the mountains and up the cliffs and so forth where people haven't been before.
Right.
So if you want to find it, you'll have to get off the beaten trail.
Okay. Just briefly, we've talked about the government closing that area to mineral entry.
Yes.
Why do you suppose that is?
Oh, there's lots of theories on it. For one thing, the Bureau of Land Management has tried to close off the public lands. They want to preserve it. They want to keep things in their natural situation. I think they go too far because being bureaucrats, they have to justify their job, so they go beyond what they're supposed to do so they can justify their wages. But why they do it? Bureaucracy.
Well, I've seen in my travels just about almost all of the gold-bearing sites where there has been historical gold, has been closed either by a federal action,
Yes.
or a state action,
Yes.
or an environmental action. And it seems to me that the government has closed all of the areas where gold is known to be to the public access. I'm not crazy about that because, first off, treasure hunting is a wonderful family
Yes,
affair.
it is.
It is
Absolutely.
it is fun.
You
It
can
is
have
wholesome.
more fun. A family can have more fun with one of these than anything else I can think of.
And, you know, it brings a strong family bond. Very important. So, talking about treasure hunting, where in the area over there by Apache Junction where are good places for a novice to begin?
Well, the first thing I would do would go to Apache Junction. Go to one of the stores there where they sell metal detectors and publications and tapes and so forth on the Lost Dutchman especially, plus a lot of other things. Also, if you go north of Apache Junction a few miles is the old
Goldfield.
Goldfield, which was sort of a reactivation of some actually old gold mines. It was actually, they found some areas they've opened up that they date back well over 100 years, and they think that they were mined actually by other Spaniards, maybe the Peraltas, and the mining techniques they used were different than we use. There is also the Superstition Mountain Association that has their own building.
The museum.
In the museum. I would suggest everybody go in there and take a look. You'll find a lot of these books there, plus a lot of other things. And they can give you information, answer almost any questions that you have.
That's the Superstition Mountain Museum in Goldfield, Arizona.
Oh, and also they have that nugget on display, the only positively known nugget that the Dutchman claims he found in the Superstitions. It's
Some actual gold.
About half the size of that nugget.
Some actual gold from the Lost
Yes,
Dutchman
and
Mine.
You can actually
Absolutely.
see it. There's proof.
Other than normal caution, one of the entrance sites I think has been LaBarge Canyon. Is that
That's one of them, yes.
a good idea is to get some satellite imagery and to get some topographic maps so that you can see where you're going. You should plan your trip going in. You should have someone with you, and you should also have someone who knows where you're going and where you're going to be. Absolutely. That's very important, so that if you do not come out, they know where to go find you.
Right, absolutely.
I've been in the area many times, and one of the old tales, I don't know, I won't swear to it, is that as you're sleeping in your sleeping bags, you're one of the warmest things out there at night, and the rattlesnakes like to come up and crawl up next to you. So
I've heard of that has happened.
So what you do in the morning is you come flying out of that bag before that snake can bite you. So that's one of the concerns. So there are a lot of dangers. You have to use wisdom. Again, no motorized vehicles are allowed in the area at this time, so it's basically packing it in. And you want to pack it in and pack it out. Keep the beauty.
Right.
It is a lovely area.
Right. You can also fly over the area. A little story on the side, in 1950 I joined the U.S. Air Force, and I was going through cadets at Williams Air Force Base at just south of Mesa. And each time we would go up solo, there would be a list of things that we were supposed to do. And I would hurry and go through that list and sort of flake off so that at the end of the list I could fly over the Superstitions looking for the Dutchman's cabin or maybe some mine tailings or something like that. So I spent a lot of time flying over the Superstition in military airplanes, but you really have to go in to find it. You won't find it in an aerial search.
Right. Well, again, it's not only about the Lost Dutchman Mine. Peralta had many mines in that area as well. So
at least 7.
I would think any gold mine would be good to find. But you want to be sure you have a good metal detector, one that is well-tuned for gold.
And how to use it.
And know how to use it. And there's lots of training. Like I say, there's, I know Promac is in Goldfield. He's a mining supply store right there at the mouth of the
right.
Of the Superstitions.
That'd be a good place to start.
And so, knowing your equipment and being prepared, we absolutely advocate research. You must have research. As Roy's talked about, going behind the footsteps of 1,000 other people normally won't benefit you. So we highly recommend that you take time. There's just all kinds of information available on the internet. Aerial photographs, topographic maps, they're all available free. So I highly recommend that you take advantage of that.
One way to go in is by horseback.
Well, our time is almost up. And in closing, first I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you. I'd like to thank my guest, Dr. Roy Rouse, for joining us. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
In leaving you, I want to share a little bit of some of the lure of the area that I learned in my research. The Apaches were a very, very fine people, a very brave people. They probably didn't get a good deal. There were many treaties made, and those treaties were broken. One of the principal leaders was a man named Geronimo. Geronimo was a very fine man, a statesman, a politician, actually a man of peace. And his main concern was leading his people into the future, growing into a developing entity as time went on, working with the white man that was coming into their area. In 1918, and Geronimo was captured, and he was imprisoned in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where he died. And he was buried there. In 1918, a society that is associated with Yale University is reported to have come in and stolen his remains. Those remains are in this society's headquarters, and this society is frequented by many people, including relatives of President Bush. And I would like to ask your help to join me in contacting Washington and getting Geronimo's remains back to his people, getting them back into the Thunder God Mountain where they belong. So if you would help me in that, if you would call your congressman, your senator, even write the president, and ask for Geronimo's remains to go back to his people. They're not a trophy. They're not a souvenir. And they belong home.
May I add a PS to that? Geronimo, in the last few years, became a celebrity, and he was with some of the Wild West shows and so forth. And he was very important and enjoyed his last few years of life.
Well, we hope you enjoyed our show. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
My pleasure.